500 years ago, these shores received their first European visitors. The Portuguese who arrived created the modern state of Brazil, promoted today for its music, dance, football, beach life. But this image hides a less appealing past. For Brazil was built on the back of the largest forced migration in history. North America is well known for its slave-owning past, but this South American country received 10 times as many, 4 million Africans. Why did Brazil become the world's largest slave-owning country? Why does it rank among the cruelest regimes of the past few centuries? Why is it a story that some still prefer not to tell?
Slavery is an inconvenient history for the Brazilian elite. There is no doubt about that. And they don't want this issue to be discussed.
In the year 1500, a Portuguese fleet, captained by Pedro Alvarez Cabral, set sail to round southern Africa, en route for Asia.
Portugal was a tiny country. It only had a population in total of just over 1 million. So for them to send a big fleet was a vast effort. And Portuguese got to Brazil almost by accident. There was a large fleet on its way to India to get spices. And it was blown rather farther west than usual, and then they saw land birds, and they followed them and made a landfall on what's now Brazil.
The lands that stretched before the Portuguese were larger than Europe. It was a remarkable discovery, equaling that of Columbus only 8 years earlier. The Portuguese eagerly sent the news home to Lisbon. Lisbon, Portugal's capital, was the world's centre of exploration. Its streets full of sailors, investors, traders, and adventurers. Only a few years previously, Vasco da Gama had finally worked his way around the southern tip of Africa and opened the sea route to the luxuries of the East.
Even though this people is the smallest of all the globe, that globe does not seem large enough to satisfy it. As soon as they have sailed along the coast, they take possession of it and consider it a conquest. Remontier, French captain.
Cabral staged a mass on the shore of Brazil, and all the Indians watched and were quite impressed by it, because they're interested in seeing the ritual that these strangers had. In that first fleet, the Indians surprised the Portuguese by how open and trusting they were. A couple of Indians came onto the ship with, of course, no clothes on at all, and they just quietly went to sleep. And the only thing they were worried about was that their feather headdresses shouldn't get disturbed as they were sleeping. And then they were just quietly lying on the deck of the ship, totally trusting.
But that trust was misplaced. This new continent seemed to contain little obvious wealth. There were no gold-clad Aztecs or Incas to conquer. The only item of interest was a valuable tree, known in Europe as Brazil wood, which gave the country its new name. But there was nothing to compare with the wealth of Asia. Except for one thing. Its land. Portugal sectioned off Brazil's coastline to rich settlers, but they soon ran into a problem. Plantations are highly labor-intensive, and Portugal's own population was too small to send suitable emigrants. The ambitious new settlers turned to slavery. Portugal, like most of Europe, was no stranger to slavery. 1 in 10 of Lisbon's population was a slave, predominantly mainly from northern Africa. So, all along the Brazilian coast, native Indians found themselves being bribed with their first iron tools or forced at gunpoint to become enslaved.
It's completely anathema to them, to a tribal Indian. They're communistic societies and they work for one another, and also the concept of overproduction is completely alien. They see no need for it. They're living in a very rich country with an evergreen system, so that the game is always out there in the forests and the fish are always there in the rivers. And so that's their supermarket. They see no need to produce too much and have it stored. And then also the concept of one man working for another man or woman is completely alien. It's horrible.
Conditions worsened. Mistreatment, physical assault, even murder. Above all, hundreds of thousands of indigenous peoples died from European diseases, smallpox, measles, and the common cold. A plantation could see its workforce of hundreds reduced to a handful in a week. In under 100 years, a population of 4 million Indians was halved. So by the year 1600, the Portuguese, requiring an alternative labour force, had turned to Africa. Portugal had recently colonized southwest Africa, including modern Angola. Only 40 days sailing across the Atlantic, this was now to become, in effect, a people factory.
Angola was the area where most slaves that were taken out of Africa and landed in the American continent came from. People complain about the way that sheep or cattle are transported across the world. Transportation of slaves was very much like that. Perhaps 300 or 400 people packed together with only enough space to lie down, without enough air, without enough water, without enough food to survive. Very often, over half of the cargo, as it were lost from these voyages.
On board ship, in miserable conditions, the terrified slaves remain for weeks, months, and the great number of them who die is unspeakable. The Oliveira Mendes, doctor.
Many vessels, after they arrive, are abandoned from the impossibility of getting any person to clean them. Dr. J. Cliff, slave trader.
A ship enters from Angola and on a single day unloads 500, 600, or perhaps 1,000 slaves. The masters were few, the slaves many. The masters feasting, the slaves dying of hunger. The masters swimming in gold and silver, the slaves weighted down with irons. Vieira, Jesuit priest.
The Portuguese treated Africa as an infinite resource. So they just imported and imported and imported in the assumption that there would be the tap would never be turned off.
A man went around with a hot iron and branded us the same as they would the heads of barrels or any other inanimate goods or merchandise. Gardo Bakaka, African slave.
Almost every house in this place is a large warehouse where the slaves are deposited and customers go to purchase. When one was ordered, he came forward, threw his arms over his head, stamped with his feet, shouted to show the soundness of his lungs, ran up and down the room and was treated exactly like a horse. And when done, he was whipped to his stall. Walsh, Traveller.
Gradually, by the end of the 16th century, the plantations build up their wealth, are able to afford to buy foreign slaves who are not going to escape as readily, and to replace the Brazilian labour that has been used hitherto.